Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Your Spiritual Journey. This episode happens to be the last one of Season 2. So we're going to wrap up with a very special guest. And then my next interview that'll be available, I'm pretty excited about too, because my son will be on. So that should be pretty neat to kick off Season 3. So with us today is Stephanie Sipusic. I hope I pronounced your last name right, Steph.
Close.
Well, give me a pronunciation so I stick with it correctly.
Sipusic, like
Sipusic. Okay.
Sipusic.
Sipusic. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Stephanie was born in 1952. You can figure out how old she is. I won't tell you. In Youngstown, Ohio, and she has lived in a variety of places in Ohio, including Boardman, Overland Park, Kansas. Well, that's not in Ohio. McDonald, Ohio, Lorain, Ohio. So she's been around Ohio quite a bit, but also, as I mentioned, she's been in Overland Park, Kansas, and London, England, and now she's back in Ohio. And let's see, are you in McDonald, Ohio now? No.
I've been in McDonald. I worked in McDonald.
Okay.
I'm in Boardman. I'm in Boardman. I'm back to where I grew up. Okay. I never like a 1 mile radius, except a couple places.
All right. She was married to a fellow named Bob, very good name. And although not currently married to Bob, they are still good friends and pretty much live next door to each other. So that's pretty interesting. She's had many jobs and occupations. The longest one was at the U.S. Postal Service. She was there for 21 years and retired due to medical reasons, which we'll probably hear about when she gives us her story, the story of her spiritual journey. So, Steph, I'm just going to turn the mic over to you. You know how this works. And then after you've given your story, I'll ask you some questions that I think our audience would like to know.
Okay. Well, you told a lot of things I was going to say, but I just wanted to say that very much over the years, I have become a big fan of synchronicity. I like it. I use it. I think it's fun. Sometimes it lets you know you made the right decision. Sometimes it helps you to know you made a decision. I just am a big fan of it. And I'm also very, I feel that we're always where we're meant to be at any point in time. We're where we're supposed to be. We might go somewhere else that next moment or day, but at that point in time, we're exactly where we're meant to be. As you said, well, I was born on my mother's birthday, which was also Abraham Lincoln's birthday. She almost didn't make it because I was a double breech birth. And so I entered this world ass backwards. And I've always kind of laughed about that. I grew up in a middle-class family. My dad, Steve, was a salesman for H.J. Heinz. My mom, Helen, was a stay-at-home mom. I had a younger sister, Michelle. And we lived with my mom's mother, my grandmother, Rose. All of my grandparents came from Slovakia. So we had a lot of Slovak traditions, but mainly we had a lot of Slovak food. Both grandfathers were steel workers, and they died before I was born. And my dad's mother died when I was, before I was 3. So I only knew one grandparent. I was raised Roman Catholic, got all my sacraments, even got married in the Catholic Church. And went to Catholic grade school for 8 years. And my mother was recruited when I was in first grade to become a teacher because of the baby boom. St. Christine's had 50 children in each classroom, and there were 4 classrooms for each grade.
Wow.
So I had 1,600 kids at St. Christine's. And so they were recruiting teachers. So she started part-time, and she actually started teaching before she did her student teaching, but she started teaching when I was in 3rd grade, and she was there for 32 years. I went to Boardman High School, and then before that, I was a Girl Scout, and I was a Brownie. I also was in the Playhouse, the local Playhouse in the children's plays. And then I went to Boardman, and then I went to Miami University. And between my sophomore and junior years, I was given the opportunity to go to London, England, and work. And I went over there just full charge, thought I could find my own place to live and everything, and I did. It was amazing. And I lived in a little walk-up a couple blocks away from Hyde Park. I took the underground. As a matter of fact, this behind me, this is a map of the underground, kind of worn, that I put up on my wall that I had framed because I went to work every day in the underground and worked, and I just had an amazing time. And then I went through Europe pretty much by myself, backpacked. And then I had many majors in college, and I ended up having a degree in business with marketing management. And as Synchronicity would have it, I wasn't even supposed to get an interview, but somebody dropped out. And so I got an interview with Dracut Products, and the president of Dracut Products was doing the interviewing. And he liked me. He knew about, like, my dad now owned a bar. He knew where the bar was, and I got the job. And that took me to Overland Park, Kansas, where I worked for a few years. Then I came back to Ohio, and I was looking for a job. And one afternoon I went to my dad's bar, and again, Synchronicity. I wasn't supposed to, he didn't like me to go there. There were only a couple guys in there, and they told me they were hiring at US Steel. And this was the first time since World War II they were hiring women to work on the mill floor. So I went right away, got a job, and started at the rolling mill in McDonald, was even given the opportunity to do some management, but then I was laid off. But before I was laid off, I met my husband. And 7 months after our first date, basically, we were married. And we moved to Berg Hill, as you said, out in the country. That wasn't kind of a fit for us. So we came back and ended up buying a duplex next door to my grandmother, where he lives to this day, and I live a few doors away. For 10 years, that's right. So then US Steel and McDonald closed. And so we went to Lorain, Ohio. And that's kind of where I would say my spiritual journey started. We actually joined the Catholic Church there and started going to church and going to the coffee and donuts after. And I started going to Overeaters Anonymous. And that's when my relationship with God changed a little bit, because it was just kind of a new way of looking at that relationship and giving up all my power to God. And then I made a renewal in the Catholic Church. And also every morning I started going to church, to Mass, and before work. I don't know why. And there were about a group of 5 or 6 women that were there every day. And I became friends with them, and not knowing anybody when we moved there. This was nice. And a matter of fact, I don't know if anybody's acquainted with Saturday Night Live that's watching this way back when it first started. There was a character called Father Guido Sarducci.
Oh, yeah.
And women that was in my little church group every morning, that was his mother. So that was kind of a fun thing. And the renewal was so good that I decided to be on the team for the next one. And I got to choose what we would call it. And it was bloom where you're planted. I fervently believe in that. No matter where you're at, what's going on, just deal with it, bloom, that's it. We gave another renewal at the Byzantine Church, was close to my heart because my grandmother actually was Byzantine Catholic and switched over to Roman when she got married. In 1985, my husband was laid off, so we came back to Boardman to our duplex. And for 10 years, I didn't want to get a job where I'd have to travel. So I was in retail sales, I was in real estate, I was doing bookkeeping, office management. And at the time, I was working for a developer in his office, doing bookkeeping and office management. And one day, I just decided I was going to work at the post office. I knew one person that worked at the post office in another town, and I really didn't know much about it. I didn't know how to apply. I didn't know how much they made. I didn't know what the benefits were, but I figured they must be good because all of these people worked there and had families. So I started telling people, and this was before I'd heard of The Secret or manifesting. I started telling people I was going to work at the post office. And this was only for like about a month. And then one day at lunch, I opened the paper and there's an article that says, there's a class for the test for the post office. Well, if there's a class, there's a test. So I called the post office. They were giving out the applications that day. I made an excuse, ran and got the application. And a year later, on July 22nd of 1995, I was now employed at the post office sorting center in Youngstown, Ohio. It was an amazing revelation. I had never seen anything like it. I just didn't, people were just going everywhere doing things. It's amazing how we get mail, but it was work. I was so much older than everyone else because I was 43 when I started. By that time, these people had already been at the post office for 25 years because they started when they were 18. And I had one boss that just did not like me. I don't know why, but he didn't. And this was really before I got into much spirituality, much more. One day I went to work and he was walking towards me and I knew he was going to say something mean or nasty or something. And I asked Archangel Michael to just put a protection around me. And as he started to walk towards me, I saw him flinch as if someone had put like a little dagger in his stomach. And he just kind of went, ugh. And he looked at me. And he kind of somehow knew I did that, but he didn't know how. And I went, Archangel Michael, thank you. And I always believed that that was really true, that he did that for me. In February.
Let me interrupt you a second. Is that the first time you ever called on Michael, or was that part of your routine?
No, I think it was really the first time I ever did. And I don't know what made me do it. I can't tell you what led me up to it, but I just asked him to protect me. I wasn't asking for that, but, and to this day, I believe that he did.
And you were aware of Michael because of your Catholic upbringing?
Yes, I think, yes, that's true. Yeah.
All right.
I believed in angels and archangels and saints and all of that. Yes, I did. I would say that I would pray to St. Jude or something, or something like that. But yeah. But I wasn't as big on angels as I was later. Yeah. I'm more spiritual journey. I'm a little closer. So anyway, in February 8th of 2003, I took a bid to go to the Warren post office in Warren, Ohio, and I was a philatelic window clerk. I had really wanted to go to Niles, but someone else took that job. And there was an opportunity for me maybe to get that job a month later, but I don't know, something told me I was supposed to be there. Was not in love with it. And so I worked there, and there was a metaphysical psychic group in Warren that I had heard about. I was curious, so I joined it. And one time I was at the meeting, a woman walked in and she was saying hi to, everybody that she knew. And her eyes like sparkled and she seemed to have such a light around her. And I thought to myself, she must be wonderful to be friends with. And even though I never tried, we became very good friends, like sisters, for 10 years. In the meantime, I had some customers that were great. One of them was really into science and he had developed some cream for burns, but he also had this program where he used sound, megahertz of sound, for different healings. And so he told me about it and he said that he would be at the psychic fair that weekend. So I went and I sat there, and my shoulder, from the top of my shoulder down to my elbow, had been killing me. I mean, it hurt so bad, and I had to use it all the time in my job. And I sat there with him, and after 20 minutes, I had absolutely no pain, and it never came back. And we went on to be friends and do other spiritual things together. Also, I met a priest. And it so happens my uncle, my mom's cousin, is a priest. I was even a flower girl in his ordination. And they had been to the seminary together, not the same years. And they couldn't have been more different. They were just opposites. And this priest was fun and happy and just friendly. And one day he said to me, "Do you know the book that changed my life?" And I went, "No." And he said, "Conversations with God" by Neil Donald Walsh. And I went, okay. So I knew nothing what I was getting into. I called a friend that I had just made recently. We had started our own little metaphysical group, and another friend had brought over a bag of books that very afternoon. And she said, "Why don't you stop over before you buy the book on your way home?" I did. And that book was in that bag.
Uh-huh.
So I was supposed to read that. Again, that synchronicity. And what that book did for me at that time was got rid of all my Catholic guilt, because I was feeling very guilty about not practicing Catholicism anymore. Like, I was really going to hell now. Then you were talking about my husband and I separated in 2000, and I moved 3 doors away from him, but I was on his insurance. And at the post office, if you don't have insurance through the post office at least 5 years before you retire, you can't have it in your retirement. It doesn't, you're not, it won't automatically come to you if you want it. So he was on strike. And so I thought, well, maybe I better sign up for the insurance here. I wasn't planning on do it for another couple years. And luckily I did. So in 2016, I had this coworker, and he was a rural carrier, and I didn't know him really well at all because he was out working all day, and I'd only see him maybe in the morning and in the evening. And I had met his wife because I did her passport. But anyway, it turned out he needed a double lung transplant. And he had a fundraiser because he needed $50,000 for Duke before they could go through with it, because that would be his part of the copay. So I couldn't go to the fundraiser, but I did give him a generous check because I was able to, and we became really good friends. So in 2016, I went on vacation. This is the year of Jimmy getting his transplant. He hadn't gotten it yet. And I thought, I should visit my pulmonologist, because when I was in college in 1972, 73 actually, right before spring break, I thought I was sick, thought I had the flu, went to the infirmary, and I had a spot on my lung, and it was called histoplasmosis. No cure. I got better. Everything was fine. In 1975, when I was in Overland Park, I got pleurisy one time. Okay, everything was fine. In 2014, I got pneumonia for the first time, and I had to be hospitalized, and that's when I got a pulmonologist. 2015, I got pneumonia again, only a different strain, and I didn't have to go to the hospital. So I had been seeing this pulmonologist, but in 2016, I didn't get sick, so I kind of didn't see him for like a year and a half almost. So when I was on vacation, I made an appointment the Friday before Labor Day and went in, and I was feeling extremely tired. My mom was in assisted living, and I was going to see her every day, and between work and things at work weren't really wonderful. And here I was only breathing at 70%. They didn't even know how I was driving, let alone driving and working. Then they took an X-ray, and my lungs looked like a beehive. So my doctor didn't know what that was. So I had to get a biopsy, and I went to get a biopsy. And the good news, it wasn't cancer. The bad news was they didn't know what it was. So while I was recovering from that biopsy, I had to spend the night in the hospital. The chaplain came in, and the chaplain was Vince Lisi. And Vince Lisi is the creator of Now Creations, which is a spiritual group in the Youngstown area. And I had been in his classes. I started kind of around 2006. And off and on, I'd been in different classes, went to different weekend things. But in the last year, I probably had not hardly been there because I was just so tired all the time. And I vowed at that moment that when I got better, I was going to go back to his classes. So my doctor said, you know what, you're going to have to go to Cleveland Clinic because I don't know, what to tell you. And as Synchronicity would have it, the director at the house where my mom was living, her stepdaughter was a pulmonary doctor who had just finished her fellowship at Cleveland Clinic. So calls were made. I got an appointment right away. And that's when they found out that I had what they call IPAP, interstitial pneumonia with autoimmune functions, which is kind of a catch-all for we don't know. I could have had it from black mold. I could have had it from asbestos. I could have had it from arthritis, from rheumatitis, from medication. There are just so many things. So for 1 year, I got to have Dr. Rousseau as my doctor, so I wouldn't have to go up to Cleveland all the time. And I had different medication, and I did rehab. After a year, she said, brought me into her office, and she said, we thought that we can stop the progression of this. They were never going to cure it, but they thought they could stop it. And she goes, at this point, you have maybe 2 to 3 years, and they're not going to be great ones because your ability to breathe is just going to get worse and worse, and you're just not going to be able to accomplish much. So you need a lung transplant. And no, not me. I'm too old. I don't have children. I don't have grandchildren. Someone else more deserving should, get these lungs, not me. Well, she didn't agree with that, and neither did my sister. So to appease them, I said, okay, I'll go through all the testing that I need to see if I can get approved to have a lung transplant. And you have to, go through everything from a colonoscopy to a mammogram. I mean, you have to just be healthy. And I went through everything, and guess what? They said I was healthy enough. So I started praying. This was 2017 after like-October. And I got out those rosary beads. I turned on the Catholic channel on QED. I, was saying the rosary every day. I was using the holy water from some grotto that the Blessed Virgin had. And I'm not dispelling any of these things. I think they're all fine and great. And I was making a lot of bargaining. I was doing a lot of bargaining with God. And I said that, if you heal me, I will go out with this miracle and I will tell everybody about the miracle that you created. Well, I guess that didn't happen, but I'm still here talking. So in January, I stopped all that. I decided, you know what? I'm just not going to worry about this anymore. Whatever happens, happens. And I had a talk with God. I didn't pray to him. I talked to him. And I said, God, it's in your hands. Whatever you want, however it's supposed to come out, perfectly fine with me. I don't care. And I really didn't. I wasn't afraid to die. I didn't care. So on February 8th of 2018, I was put on the transplant list, which I want to tell you is a little synchronistic date because February 8th of 2003 is when I went to the Warren Post Office, my first day. And all of this had happened. And I got to meet Jimmy, go through his transplant with him. So I knew going in all of the possibilities that things could happen. Jimmy went to get his transplant and it was a no-go. The lungs weren't right. Then when he got it, he had some rejection. Then he got sepsis. He just had all of these things going wrong. So I knew it wasn't a walk in the park. Less than 30 days after that, on March 5th, of 2018, I went to rehab and I could not finish my rehab that day because my breathing was so bad. Even on 15 liters of oxygen, I couldn't make my laps around the room. I couldn't even do one lap. And I came home and my sister had come over to say goodbye because she had been here for my mom's birthday earlier. And she was going back to San Francisco where she lived. And so I said, Okay. So she went out to do an errand for me. She ran to Home Depot. And while she was at Home Depot, I got a phone call. It was Cleveland Clinic. We have lungs for you. Come on down. I went, oh, well, I just started an antibiotic 3 days ago. They said, do you have a fever? I said, no. Okay, we'll call you back. So my sister comes back. I tell her what happened. They called like minutes later. And within 20 minutes, we were headed to Cleveland Clinic. And I have to tell you, I was not nervous. I was calm. I was happy. I just enjoyed the ride. I didn't worry, would we get there on time? I didn't worry whether or not it was going to happen. I didn't worry about anything. Traffic, nothing. I just was very calm and went, I guess this is what's supposed to happen. And when I got there, all of the medical personnel just could not believe how completely calm I was. And on March 6th, I got a new set of lungs from someone who was caring enough to be a donor. And when I woke up in the ICU, my sister, who was just a wonderful caretaker, had never done anything like this before, but she got me through to this point and after. And Jimmy and his wife, Renee, were sitting there at my bed. And so we had gone full circle. And after that, I seemed to run across people that I could help with their journey for their lungs. That's my story.
Wow. That's pretty amazing. So you had no issues with rejection or anything like Jimmy went through?
Nothing. A matter of fact, I felt bad. I didn't even want to tell Jimmy how everything was going so good because I just kind of bad, you know.
Yeah.
Yes, he since last year had to get a kidney transplant also.
Yeah.
Sometimes these transplants affect your kidneys and your liver. But my 5-year checkup last month, and everything's great.
Yeah. So this, one of the questions that come to my mind is that some people who've had transplants feel a connection to the donor in some way, because it carries the donor's DNA.
Mm-hmm.
That sometimes spiritually there's a connection, or just mentally there's a connection. So I just wondered if you felt anything from the donor after this.
No, I actually didn't. I wrote a letter. You can write a letter and it's forwarded on, and that really wants to connect with you or write a letter back, they do. Well, my family didn't. And at first I felt kind of bad because there's some people that they meet the families, they, interact with them, all kinds of things. And I don't really go to psychics a lot or anything. But I did after that, every time if the psychic was around, I'd ask, do you know who my donor was? One person said they thought it was a young man who was on a motorcycle, but he did have a wife and a couple kids. But I really didn't know.
Yeah.
And I was told by a couple other ones and some really good ones that I'm not supposed to know. And it was the contract. So the other day when we were reading Sue Morter's book, and we had that bus stop conversations, I realized that my donor must have raised his hand. And okay. I thank the donor all along. I mean, I just always say very much, when I'm saying good morning, talking to God in the morning, I always, thank him. And I do talk to angels. When you talk about angels, when we lived in Lorraine, I got pregnant, and I was really excited. And I had decided if it was a girl, I was going to name it Micheline, because after my sister Michelle and my mom Helen. I never told my husband. I never told anybody, not one person. And when I told you about that girl that I met, that I wanted to be friends with, she used to have these groups, and there were some quite psychic people in her group. And one day when we were in a meeting, this girl said, I see your angel around you, and your angel's name is Micheline.
Oh,
And I had never uttered that word to a living soul.
yeah.
So I feel that she is my angel.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
So the reference that you made to Sue Morter, our listeners don't know what we're talking about here. So we could you explain the bus stop experience and who Sue Morter is?
Well, Sue Morter wrote the energy codes, and she had some uh, experiences, spiritual experiences, and it led her to some spiritual healing. And anyway, the bus stop is kind of an analogy for before we come down here for reincarnating, where you're all standing there waiting for the bus to Earth, and you start talking to each other, and you say, "Well, why are you here? I mean, why are you going to Earth?" And they go, "Well, I want to go to be a loving person and to show love." Another person says, "Well, I want to learn how to not worry so much." Another person says, "Well, I want to learn forgiveness." And another person says, "I want to be a teacher of love." So whatever the reasons are. So they said to this one person, "Well, why do you want to go down?" And I'm going to make her she. I said, well, she says, "Well, I want to have an experience of forgiveness, but just not any forgiveness, level 10 forgiveness." And they went, "Wow, well, what would that be like?" And she said, "Well, someone's going to be drinking at happy hour, and they're going to get in their car, and they're going to go over the center line, and they're going to hit me head on. And if I really want to make it a really great level 10, I might lose some family members in that crash, or I might be paralyzed. And that I will have to go through a lot to forgive that person." So she said, "Who wants to help me out?" And, nobody's answering. And she says, "Come on, I've always wanted to do this. This is my chance. Come on, I really want to do this." And so finally, one person raises their hand and said, "I'll do it." And, everybody's like, "Ooh." And he goes, "Because I need to experience self forgiveness." So after I heard that, um, when I said I had problems at the post office, there was this one person there, and she made my life a living hell every day. We just had big problems together. And after I'd had my transplant, and it was around the time I wrote my letter to my donor, I decided to write her a letter and to tell her I was sorry, not for anything she did. I did not accuse her of anything. I was sorry for my part. Sorry about that. And she said that, so I told her I was sorry for my part in the what happened. And I told her she didn't have to answer me. Well, she didn't. But then not long after that, I saw her. We were somewhere, and there she was. And she looked at me. I looked at her. She came up and hugged me. And she said, why do we do this? We could have been such good friends. But the other day, when I recounted this in my mind and thought about this story about the bus stop, I realized that she had raised her hand, and I needed her for this lesson in forgiveness, because it was the biggest lesson I had really in my life. And the funny part was that, Bob, that day was her birthday.
Oh,
So back to my synchronicities, back to my synchronicities. Uh, you know,
yeah, it's just nice how things fall together sometimes like that.
yeah.
It's good. Oh, sometimes I just tear up when I hear these stories. I can't help it. So, uh, so getting back to you're running into Vince Lisi at the hospital, and then decided that once you got through all this, you'd take now creations more seriously. Can you talk
Yeah.
about that experience?
Well, before I talk about that, let me give you one other experience I had because I
Okay.
think it's kind back in 2005. Um, I had heard about some weekend retreat up in Cleveland at some church, and it was about energy healing, and no, I'm sorry. Oh, forget that. Okay, in 2005, I read a book called The Reconnection by Dr. Eric Pearl, and it was about energy healing. I hadn't heard about Reiki at the time, but it's basically like Reiki, except you don't touch the people. And I just was so enthralled with it. And the thought of healing someone just sounded so fabulous that I booked myself a flight to Chicago and just went there. And I stayed at this hotel for 2 days. And so they were doing energy, we were learning how to do the energy healing. But then that evening, the first evening, they would come and work on you. So they brought a table up to my room and put it next to the window, and they were working on me. And while they were working on me, I had my very first out of body experience. I saw my body raise up in the prone position, like I was laying, and I saw it up in the air, just there. I didn't know why. But the funny part was I wasn't wearing the same clothes I was wearing on the table. I was physically wearing. I was wearing jeans and a t-shirt, and my body was wearing black slacks and this brown sweater that had uh, uh, black diamonds on it, which I owned, but didn't even have with me. And then my body just kind of floated out the window, and I felt very good, but I had no idea what that meant. Okay, so now go a couple of years later, in February 2007, I hear about this the loving course, and it's about forgiveness, love and forgiveness. So I go to Cleveland, and we spend 2 days going in our past, looking at different things, and forgiving, what happened. And at the end of the session on Sunday, we all go in a circle. And I don't know what's going to happen, but all of a sudden they ask one person to walk in the middle of the circle, and everybody comes together and lifts this person up in that prone position. We're all holding that person up. Well, my first thought is, oh my God, I'm like heavier than all, bigger than these other people. How are they going to do that to me? But then I realized I had on that very same outfit that I had seen 2 years ago. And so I realized that the true healing had come that day, not necessarily 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And so I've always, now to go to Vince, yeah, I started back coming to Vince's classes. Of course, I never worked again. Also, that thing I was talking about, the insurance, luckily I got the insurance when I did, because because of me retiring so suddenly, I wouldn't have qualified. And just, wouldn't have had this nice coverage that helped me through all of this. But I go to Vince's, and I started, really doing A Course in Miracles, and, reading some other books, and meeting other people, and just, I don't know, just really getting out of my physical self into my spiritual self.
Yeah. So during the couple bad years of COVID, and I'm thinking that you're probably at that point a high risk person
Yes.
with a relatively new transplant. How did you navigate those couple years?
Well, I just didn't, well, even right after you have the transplant, you shouldn't be around large groups of people. And I used to wear a mask. That's before COVID happened. Like if I'd go to the casino or I'd go to somewhere, I would wear my mask. A matter of fact, my mother died 6 weeks after my transplant. And we had a celebration of life for her another couple of weeks after that. And I actually wore plastic gloves and my mask when everybody was coming to the ceremony, so I wouldn't touch anybody. And I don't usually eat from buffets.
Yeah.
I won't go to a restaurant or a wedding and eat from a buffet. But other than that, so when COVID came, I pretty much knew how to handle myself. No, I didn't go out a lot. Um, I did take the vaccine. I actually took 3 shots, the first 3. I was on the John Hopkins study for the COVID vaccine and people that were transplant um, recipients. And I was with this group in Canada on the Zoom class, and they just kind of ripped me because none of them were pro the COVID shot.
Wow.
And I was surprised because I did it for my donor more than for me. You know, I always try to do everything because I honor my donor that gave me the second chance. And I had asked the angels myself, should I do this or not? And they said, they didn't say not to. So I, did it. Now I found out after I took these shots that I didn't get any antibodies from the shots. So after those 3, I did not get any more or do anything else. And then I was told, well, maybe you should do Evishield. And then as we found out, that was not a good thing. So it's after the 3, I then did get spiritual knowledge that I shouldn't do anymore. So I'm very fortunate because when COVID hit, I knew one person we knew right away died before anything really happened. We didn't even know about it. He had picked someone up from the airport from New York, and turns out she had COVID and he had other underlying conditions. But it was good. What happened to me through COVID was all of the groups I was able to be with, on Zoom with Vince. At first it was Skype and then it was Zoom. And I just immersed myself, I think, in a lot of spiritual practices and reading and.
Yeah. Well, I certainly feel honored that you joined our 2 groups. It's just nice to have you with us all the time.
I like that you guys are really nice and you welcome me, and I wish some days I lived in Pittsburgh so I can go and see you guys outside the groups.
Okay, I need a clarification. You mentioned Dr. Eric somebody, and I didn't catch the last name.
Pearl, Pearl.
Okay.
Matter of fact, I think he's Jewish.
Okay. And that particular workshop that you went for, was that all like energy modalities or?
Yeah. Yes.
Now, you didn't bring this up here, but I think you mentioned this at one of our meetings, that you've now gone for Reiki training yourself.
Yes, I went on April 8th. I did level 1.
Okay. So what's your plan with that? I know with level 1 Reiki, you can just do it on yourself or do it on yourself and your friends, or you can take it further and get level 2 and eventually become a Reiki master.
I don't know. I haven't decided. I mean, when I took the reconnection, I never worked on anybody. I was told at one point at the beginning that my ego was getting in the way, and which I thought was funny because I didn't understand what they were talking about, because I felt I was a very humble person. I didn't have this big ego, but I realized what they were saying is I wasn't doing this healing. It was coming through me, and I maybe didn't quite understand that at the time. So the Reiki wasn't that much different. You just have a lot more little things that I was taught, to do a little differently. When I didn't feel confident, and there you go, the ego. I wasn't being the one that was actually doing the healing, but I didn't do it on anybody except my ex-husband. He had some back issues, And he used to come over and I'd do it on him and he would just feel fine. And I didn't even do it on myself. I was thinking about this the other night. I didn't even try it on myself with the lungs.
Uh-huh.
I did. I don't know. I've always wanted to heal people. I've always thought that was like the greatest thing you could possibly do. That and maybe being with people like in hospice. I just think to be with them at the end and to help them transition. I was there for my uncle. One day I was driving home from work and my uncle was in hospice. And I suddenly got this urge to go right to hospice. And when I got there, the whole family was there. It's a small family, and my mom was there. That was her brother, and his wife was there, and his 3 kids were there, and his daughter-in-law were there. And my mom didn't call me, and my friend was there, who is a Reiki master. She was a nurse there, and she was sitting at the end of his bed, and she was holding his feet. And when I came in, he was just gasping for air, just really gasping. And I went up and I held my hand by his face and I gave him some healing energy. And immediately he calmed down and his breathing just got like normal. And he wasn't gasping. And my aunt all of a sudden like took my arm and went, "What did you do to him?" I mean, she thought, he was dead. And I mean, he did die that after, not shortly after that, but he just calmed down as if I came to calm him. And about a year later, I was at an event and this psychic was there, and Greg Keene was his name. And he was walking down the aisle and he looked over at me and he said, "Your uncle wants to thank you for being there. He really needed you at that time." So it kind of made me feel that sometimes, being with someone, I feel like being with my mom was a good thing. Luckily I was able to be with her at the end. I wasn't able to be with my dad or my grandmother, but I was supposed to be with her. So I don't know if I'm going to, if I'm actually going to heal people, maybe just my family or, I don't know yet.
Okay.
I don't plan that far ahead, Bob. I let what the next step is.
Understandable. The amount of synchronicity you've had in your life, you might as well just wait till you're guided wherever you're guided.
Yeah. When the sign comes up, I'll know.
Yeah. Well, when I talk to people like you, I just feel like you're a walking miracle. Not that we all aren't walking miracles, but having gone through that transplant and coming out on the other side, just as you have been able to without any complications or issues.
Yeah. And being able to help other people. Like once we met this couple from Iowa, and this was his last chance. He had gone to 2 other places where age was a deciding factor. And Cleveland is one of the few that age really doesn't enter into it. They'll take older people, because some people wouldn't have taken me once I was over 65, because I 6 right before the transplant. But so this was his last chance. Plus, he had a heart problem, and so that was another thing. Well, Cleveland Clinic is just, I really can't say enough about them. And so we met them, and we and then the day he had, the day after, a couple days after, because he was already in his room, he actually had the transplant. We happened to be there. Again, the synchronicity, we happened to be up there and we were with him. And it's just, and if I used to go, whenever I would go for my checkups, I'd go over to the hospital part, because I'm in the building across from the main hospital. And I would go to my floor and I would see who was in my room. And I would say, I talked to them. And if I would encounter anybody else that I could talk to, I would too, because people are going through a lot of things. Some people are in there waiting for a transplant. I mean, they don't have long to go. Right. And I have met that where they had to take their loved ones back home because there was no way it was going to happen. So But then when COVID came, then that stopped. And then now I haven't done that again because they still had those restrictions on. But maybe, next time I go, I will be able to do that. But people appreciate it. It's like, we're on a Facebook page together. People appreciate that. Other people going through the same thing you've gone through, it helps them a lot.
Yeah. So it's at this stage of every podcast where I give my guests the opportunity to leave the audience with any words that they would like to leave them with. They can be wise words or just just a joke. It could be any words that you like to leave the audience with.
Well, like I said, I think that you're always wherever you're supposed to be. Don't doubt synchronicity in your life. If you feel something inside you're supposed to do it or not do it, follow that intuition. And be happy. Don't find reasons to not be happy. Don't become a victim. I wasn't a victim. I was a person that got a lung disease, but I wasn't a victim. And, maybe it was just something I was supposed to go through. Maybe not. Who knows? But surround yourself with people like Bob Dove and that can give you that spiritual guidance, that positivity, people that make the world happy and smile at you and you smile back.
You do that a lot.
I try. I give up parts I cannot believe.
Yeah.
And I even found when you have your mask on, people can see you smiling because your eyes smile. Because I'd be in the grocery store and I'd smile and they'd smile back. I go, oh yeah, we can see each other smile. So smile more. Everybody should smile more.
Yeah, well, I see your posts on Facebook and they're always so uplifting.
Well, I'm an image person. When I see an image that gets me, I like to share it. And, I think if something gets me, someone else is going to get them too. So whether it's one person or 1,000, that's fine with me. If I just touch one person, that's enough.
Yeah. Well, I think you were the perfect person to end our second season with. It's been so nice to have you with us. I do want to mention to our listeners and our viewers that you have an opportunity to support us through Patreon. You can also support us just by liking or following or subscribing. So whatever form that you can, please support this podcast so that we can continue well into the future. Thank you so much for being with us, and we'll see you next time. Bye, Steph, and bye, audience.